forgiven, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, I want to tell you a story. I actually scripted this, so I wrote this. And this is going to be for our rookie COs. I think this is some advice that I want to give you, as you start this career. And I wrote this down. It's a story I'm sharing. It's my personal story. But I want to share this with you and hope that you get some value from it. And I usually don't script. I usually don't write a story. I usually go from the top of my head. But I wanted to make sure that I got the thoughts out on this one. And it's basically about asking myself the right question. Jim Rohn, who's a well-received motivational speaker, says a person who has purpose in their life has something to go for, some meaning. It pulls us, especially into the future. How did I end up working in a prison? I didn't grow up wanting to work in a prison. I can't even recall knowing someone who worked in one. Before my employment, my knowledge about prisons and jails strictly came from what was seen on TV or read about in papers. Basically, at the time, I had no idea what I could offer this profession, and I had no idea what this profession could offer me. I just needed a job. I needed a career. And at 24, corrections was the only valid option because it gave me a salary, benefits, and let's not forget to mention vacation days. My choice to enter corrections was just that simple. Discovering my purpose did not happen in the academy. Since the academy really pushes an individual both mentally and physically, I was purely focused on just making it through. I had no time or energy to focus anywhere else. Every day in the academy, I was faced with new challenges, whether it was learning inmates' rights, professional code of conduct, report writing, communication skills, or being physically pushed beyond my limits through the daily workout regimens, getting beaten to a pulp during my use of force training, or the firing a weapon for the first time. All my energy had to remain focused on making it through the academy. But after I completed the academy, I went straight to on-the-job training. That is when I got partnered with different senior staff members who would teach me basically how to apply what I learned from the academy. As a new boot, this was my time to be an apprentice and bring balance by blending academia, that's the foundation, with experience, application. I was blessed to have trainers who wanted to train, and they were blessed to have me, a student who wanted to learn. It was a beautiful dance, a beautiful partnership. As a new boot, I learned very quickly that when someone with experience talks, you just shut up and listen. Eventually, as the job became more routine to me, counts, reliefs, searches, report writing, security checks, etc., my mind opened up to other areas of the prison where my role was not as direct. I began looking to the left and right of me and observed as other departments, social services, mental health, medical, education, admin, internal affairs, etc., interacted with custody. These interactions helped me at the very beginning of my career to see the bigger picture. In order to complete the mission, which is about protecting the public while operating a secured and safe facility that encourages rehabilitation of inmates for re-entry into society, all departments, all personnel had to work together as one. This picture would constantly play itself out as I moved up in rank. Officer to sergeant, and then years later when I crossed into prison administration. Within my first year, I began seeing this job as a career. I kept my mindset on learning something new every day. I challenged myself daily by asking just one simple question before my day was over. Have I done enough? For many, they enter work already looking at the clock and counting the hours they have left. Staff that punch in and punch out at the same time can be a scary thing in corrections. Sure, physically they're present and on their post for 8 to 12 to 16 hours, but mentally their mindset is focused on the day ending. In essence, staff with their focus anywhere else but in the here and now are a threat to the safety of the facility. Their shift in focus from the here and now eliminates their ability to be 100% effective in the moment. In corrections, 100% attention to the here and now is essential to our survival. John Maxwell is a motivational speaker and author, states, leadership's ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. As my confidence within myself grew in the first year, eventually every obstacle I faced changed into an opportunity for growth. Samuel Beckett said, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. Please be mindful, as much as the environment can be the greatest tool to cultivate growth, it can also be its greatest resistance. During this phase, I was very careful of who I let into my circle. As I was trying to discover my way, my purpose, I was extremely vulnerable to the influences of others. I didn't want to quit, and I wanted people next to me who could keep me motivated. In my path to success, there were many disgruntled correctional workers who found their reasons for hating a career that they have worked in for most of their life. While going through this stage of my career and being vulnerable to any forms of influence, I actively looked every day to avoid those types of people and tried looking for those who took the road less traveled. Those who, while going through the darkest of times, found reasons to remain loyal and love the profession even more. Therefore, I had to connect with like-minded individuals. Like-minded individuals who found value for the work being done. Individuals who failed at points in their career but never got discouraged. As John Maxwell would say, they failed forward. They were the ones that would eventually be a big part of my professional and personal growth. Gary Vaynerchuk, motivated speaker and influencer, states, if you fail, loss, change who you're listening to. Even though this piece of advice from Gary wasn't around when I entered this profession, I knew enough of what I needed personally and was strong enough to push away anyone who became an opponent to my growth. My growth in this profession was all about understanding the fundamental why behind the work being done. The why supersedes the how. A good trainer knows how to utilize the why in an effort to maintain everlasting knowledge in the person they are training. This was a very important concept for me when I began seeing this as a career as opposed to just a job. The why has the ability to connect people. The why has a way of personalizing what is being taught and find balance between experience and validation. It's the center for all leaders to find their meaningful contribution. The why. The why is what motivated me and guided me into asking the right person the right questions. Yes, I did have some trainers in my career who taught me some great tips into how the work must get done, but they failed to tell me the why behind the work. As an apprentice, seek the why. William Young, author of When Home Becomes a Housing Unit, states, I think that's part of the divide between older staff and newer staff. Younger officers want to know the why, and the older staff are from a generation that didn't ask, they just did. As a new boot, I may have been looking for the impossible. I looked for experienced trainers that went beyond the how, and eventually I did find one such officer who worked the overnight shift. Did I say overnight? Yes, I did. This is going to be the main part of the story, my interaction with a overnight, more experienced officer. And I want to share this because has value with me even till today. And this was pretty much at the beginning of my career, almost 19, 20 years ago. So leaders influence change. And by the way, guys, when I'm reading this, guys, being a leader is not about position. It's about your ability to influence someone else. So once you're in this profession, you don't have to move up to be a leader. Sometimes that's not in our control about moving up. But what we can control is our influence over others. Once my first year on the job was completed, I was able to do recips or reciprocals. Now, what does that mean? Basically, I worked for someone else's shift and they worked for mine. So every week I would do 2 16-hour shifts back to back and 1 8-hour shift to complete my 40-hour work week. I did my 40 hours in 3 days, which gave me the rest of the week off. Must admit, it's not that bad to have a career that only requires you to work 3 days a week. I was a second shift officer assigned to a shift that began at 2 p.m. and ended at 10 p.m. I did a shift reciprocal with an officer who worked overnights. Their shift began at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. I chose the night shift over the morning shift because it was harder for me to get up at 4:30 a.m. for a 6 a.m. start. I was about an hour away from work when I began my career. Hour there, hour back. The overnight shift had some interesting officers, to say the least. Most were officers that chose the overnight shift due to life circumstances, childcare, second job, school, etc. It was a smaller shift that covered more ground. Both the officers and the supervisors on the overnight shift have a larger span of control because the overnight shift isn't as heavily staffed as the earlier shifts. Overnight shifts is mostly a security shift in which officers do their security rounds and prepare the facility for the next day of operations. Now, the best interaction I've ever had, or series of interactions, it all started with a cup of coffee. In my experience, most correctional officers who work overnight love their coffee. Coffee can be very, very inviting. Being new to the overnight shift, I found myself in need of a cup or two as well. So I followed the path that others took and went to an officer in one of the max units who had a reputation for making one hell of a cup. I remember entering his unit for the first time and observing his interactions with other staff members as they received their cup of freshly brewed coffee. Staff never just took the coffee from him and left. Instead, staff would take the coffee and start up a conversation. They chose to remain in the unit and privately, not within earshot of the inmate population, discuss their personal or professional lives with him. Be mindful, most only knew him from the job. I noticed very quickly that the staff wasn't just coming for the coffee. They were coming for the company. They valued him and he valued them. Initially, coffee may have been the main reason that brought them to his unit, including supervisors, but he was definitely the main reason they stayed. Simon Sinek believes that leadership is not based on position, but rather how we take care of the people around us. Looking back, that's what this officer was doing. He gave them coffee, a place to unwind, and on top of all that, he also gave them his full attention. He really mattered to them because they really mattered to him. He was genuine, sincere, and more importantly, actively engaged in how they felt mentally and physically. He was a peer they respected, and more importantly, a peer that they trusted. Needless to say, when he gave me my cup of coffee, I began asking so many questions. How long have you been on the job? Why the overnight shift? What type of coffee is this? He was quick to answer that he was 1 year away from retiring and the overnight shift fit his schedule the best way for his life. He never answered my question about the type of coffee he was serving. Looking back on it now, it may have been steak coffee. Didn't matter though. People loved it. I loved it. Eventually, when the room cleared, he began asking me a series of questions. How long have I been on the job? What did I think of this profession so far? What did I do before this? These were simple questions for me to answer. At the time, I had a year on the job. I enjoyed the work so far, and I was a waiter prior. Simple enough. But then he asked me a very unique question that caught me by surprise. What are you able to give to this profession? No one asked me that before. I've never even asked that of myself. All I cared about at first was what the job could offer me. In essence, financial stability and benefits. This was the first time I began to question what I can do for this profession. This is the first time I began to question my overall worth to this profession. To be honest with you, it's not an easy question for someone with 1 year on the job to answer, but it's a question that should be asked every day of your career, starting from day one. Could this be my fundamental why? At that moment, I don't think he expected an answer from me. I truly think his goal was to get me to start thinking about something meaningful that I could connect myself to that would provide me with a greater purpose in this profession. A purpose that would truly hold me steady when times become challenging and the road ahead wasn't so clear. The question was very insightful, and it was a question that was meant to give me direction. Either way, even if I thought I could answer it, he was already beginning another daily tour of his wing. So I kept my mouth shut and observed his routine. As he did his tours, he had a style to it that I would never forget. He would hold his right foot against the bottom of the cell door. Then he would shine his flashlight by the lock, then slowly bring the light up to the window of the cell and shine the light starting from the ceiling of the room all the way down to the inmate's bed where they would be fast asleep. As I stood there and observed how he did his rounds, he would also tell me why. My foot goes against the bottom of the door just in case the cell wasn't properly locked. There was this time when an inmate was able to manipulate the lock and push the door wide open, hitting me right in the face. Lesson learned. Also, it doesn't hurt to double check and see if the lock is secured and remains secured throughout your rounds. We have some very crafty inmates here. Once I've confirmed that the lock is secured, now it's safe to look into the room. I always start from the ceiling down because shining the light high will brighten up the entire room. This way I can see where the inmate is immediately, as opposed to assuming they're in the bed first and having them surprise me. There have been a few inmates in my time who have been known to hide and then try to scare me by making me jump. In his mind, the how did not outweigh the why. For him, his main focus was on the why, because the why tends to be harder to find. As he completed his rounds, I noticed a growing need within myself to change, not only the certain habits I had developed in my year touring units, but how I viewed my work. It was amazing how my first interaction with a total stranger changed my mindset and my goals. It wasn't about having an exact answer to the question he asked, but rather my investment in the process to seek and discover that answer. It's about me finding my meaningful contribution in this profession, and it was about an investment into seeking and discovering my purpose. Within my second year working those recips, I found my way into his unit a lot. Our discussions were deep and very insightful. He was an officer on his way out, and I was an officer who had my whole career in front of me. It was his experience talking to my inexperience. It's the best gift this profession ever gave me. This gift taught me to value those who have walked the walk, or better yet, those who have walked the tears. He retired sometime right after the completion of my second year. We've had no follow-up, no communication since then. He's gone, but not forgotten. During that year, he had a big influence on me, an influence that has taken me higher and higher in this profession. He influenced me to look inwards. He influenced me to find value in myself and try my best to have purpose and be catalyst for positive change. Lastly, and most importantly, he reminded me that your position in life does not limit your ability to be a leader. It doesn't limit your ability to be a person of influence, as John Maxwell would say. He affected many lives in a positive way, including his supervisors. Through coffee, he took care of the people around him. Leaders influence positive change, and that is what he did every day through the advice and insight he provided to others. He changed how I viewed myself and gave me the push I needed to discover something within me that I didn't even know existed. Instead of settling into a job because I needed financial stability, he influenced me to see this as a career with many opportunities for personal and professional growth. He taught me that each challenge is an opportunity in disguise, and each opportunity is a chance to grow. Just like the many before me, he got me to listen by showing he cared. Still to this day, when I do my rounds, and yes, as a manager, I still tour, I still find myself putting my foot by the door and checking the lock. Sad to say, I still do it even if the door slides open. It's not the how that keeps that routine in my head, but rather the why. The why that connected me to his personal story. Even though the why he shared with me that day may appear on the surface as job-related, by looking just a bit deeper, I noticed that it was way more than a specific job function. It's about purpose. It's about his want to protect me from making the same mistake he made. And true purpose is still defined by my need to put my foot on the door of a cell and making sure the lock is secured has the potential to be everlasting. So guys, that's just a quick story I wanted to share. I believe there's a lot of advice there for the new boots, but if anything, it's just a good story to share about my interactions with a wonderful officer who has long since retired. I look back at my career now and I can't believe that interaction was 19 years ago. That's how fast time goes. But it feels like only yesterday because of the impact it's had on my career. Asking myself every day, have I done enough? Asking myself, what can I do for this profession? I think that's what keeps me going through the roughest of times. Because those answers bring value. And then I connect myself with the people that have the same value I do. Well, it's a good story to share. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, guys, it's Tier Talk. Don't forget, subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.